Greg Abbott has broken every fundraising record in Texas history. He was the longest-serving attorney general in Texas history. He single-handedly created the most hated man in Texas, and his own agriculture commissioner has said that dealing with him is like, quote, dealing with a Sasquatch. Greg Abbott presides over a state budget that is double any governor before him. He has a dog named after the Whataburger menu. He once sent 2 buses full of Latin American migrants to Kamala Harris's house, probably because he thought it would be funny, and Republicans loved him for it.
I begin busing illegal immigrants to Washington, D.C.
He's on track to destroy the record for longest-serving governor in Texas history, and none of that comes even close to the craziest thing Greg Abbott has done. What you are looking at is the largest amount of money that each governor of Texas raised while campaigning for their seat. You've got William P. Clements, who happens to be the namesake of my high school, coming in '86 with $13 million. Ann Richards in 1990 with a measly $12.5 million. George W. MD's Bush with $25.2 million in '98, and Rick Perry in 2010 coming in with a whopping $39.3 million. And then you have Greg Abbott. Texas has long been the Wild West of big money, no limit political giving. But even adjusted for inflation, Greg Abbott is just better. He's so dominant in Texas that he makes Rick Perry, who is twice the frontrunner to be the Republican nominee for president, and George Mission Accomplished Bush, who would go on to become president, look like absolute peasants in comparison. Abbott is the most prolific fundraiser in Texas history, and it's not even particularly close. But he didn't stop there. By the end of the 2024 election cycle, Greg Abbott had raised another $90 million. To put this into perspective, Gavin Newsom, the current governor of California, raised $25 million for his race in 2022. New York Governor Kathy Hochul raised $55 million. Mikey Sherrill, New Jersey governor-elect, raised $29. Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, $65. Greg Abbott, by the end of 2024, had outraised them all by $25, $45, $65 million. Oh, and I forgot to mention, in 2024, Greg Abbott wasn't even on the ballot. That's right, Greg Abbott is such a successful fundraiser that even when he's not even running for anything, his donors just shower him with millions and millions of dollars just for existing. So what's going on? Do these donors just love Greg Abbott so much that they're willing to throw wads of cash at him even when they know full well that he won't be able to use it for another 3 years? No, of course not. Greg Abbott's donors know that if they give him a couple $100,000 here or a couple $1 million there, he might just reward them with an appointment to a prestigious board or commission, or perhaps to an agency that just happens to regulate the industries where they do business. For example, if you happen to be an oil baron named Paul L. Foster and you want to get ahead of your competitors and the government by controlling ERCOT, the agency that regulates your industry, you might just donate a quick 2.1 milli to Greg Abbott, and before you know it, you've got the job. Or if you're particularly generous, for example, you might donate a quick $4.3 million, such as Mr. James Doug Pitcock Jr. did, and your construction firm might just be awarded with $1.9 billion in Department of Transportation contracts. If you have millions to spare and you know that your donation is going to pay off handsomely, it doesn't even matter if the man is running or not. Just send the money and watch the profits fly in. Greg Abbott has used his appointing power to reshape the Texas government in his image. And By every metric, he has consolidated power around himself like none other before him. Greg Abbott has appointed over 9,000 state, county, and local officials. Out of Texas's 9 Supreme Court justices, Greg Abbott personally has appointed 7 of them. And now he is going even further to reshape Texas's elected representatives in his image as well. If you're from Texas, you're surely familiar with the most hated man in the state, Senator Ted Cruz. Sorry for that jump scare. But what you may not know is that Greg Abbott single-handedly launched Rafael Edward Cruz's political career by hiring him to be Texas's first Solicitor General in 2002. What you also may not know is that Greg Abbott controlled Ted Cancun Cruz's field operations when he was facing his most serious challenger for his Senate seat in Representative Beto O'Rourke. Abbott used his own enormous campaign infrastructure to personally make sure that Ted Cruz won the election, cementing the political career of the most despised man in Texas. In addition to making Ted Cruz's career, Greg Abbott is also pushing to force the Texas congressional delegation into permanent Republican hands by gerrymandering as many Democratic legislators as possible out of existence. Just this August, Greg Abbott called a special session of the Texas legislature to redraw the congressional maps, and he got just what he wanted. Despite a fight from the people of Texas, 5 Democratic seats have been wiped off the map, giving Republicans a representation of 80%, even while they only make up around 55% of the electorate. Vladimir Putin numbers, really. The maps were already gerrymandered into oblivion, and now they just serve to disenfranchise minority and working class communities while cementing Greg Abbott's power in the state even more. More than just gerrymandering, Greg Abbott has also worked to suppress voting in Texas as much as possible, deliberately taking away people's ability to vote by purging voter rolls and enacting voter suppression laws that make it harder for everyone to vote. From Greg Abbott's fundraising prowess and his pay-to-play appointment scheme to his giving birth to Ted Cruz and his efforts to gerrymander and suppress voting, Greg Abbott has become the most dominant politician to ever enter the realm of Texas politics. And having just announced his bid for a record-breaking 4th term as governor, he's just getting started.
Thank y'all very much. Thank y'all very much.
Greg Abbott is a walking list of contradictions. As Attorney General, he often joked that his entire job was to sue Obama and nothing else.
For the past 5 years, my job description's got me. I go into the office, I sue Barack Obama, and then I go home.
I say he joked. No, he did actually sue the Obama administration 34 times in 6 years. In one of his cases, he argued that Texas cities shouldn't have to provide wheelchair access because the Americans with Disabilities Act, he said, was unconstitutional. He did this while sitting in a wheelchair, paralyzed waist down since the age of 26. In 2022, he bussed over 100 Latin American immigrants directly to Kamala Harris's house in Washington, D.C., and he bussed tens of thousands more to New York, Chicago, Denver, Philadelphia, and LA. This set off a chain reaction, causing the governors of Arizona and Florida to hop in on the action and send busloads of their own migrants to these cities as well. In the same year, Abbott supercharged border inspections across Texas's 1,254-mile-long border with Mexico, leading to the apprehension of 0 grams of drugs and 0 migrants, not to mention $4.3 billion in expenses. He did this all while his wife of 44 years is Hispanic and the granddaughter of Mexican immigrants. Greg Abbott is the darling of the fossil fuel industry, cutting corporate tax rates and receiving tens of millions of dollars from the industry's titans, including a cool 6.3 milli from S. Javed Anwar, a Texas oil mogul and CEO of Midland Energy. And at the same time, he's skyrocketed Texas's renewable energy production capacity. Texas, at the start of his tenure, was a middle-of-the-road producer of renewables. Today, Texas is the largest producer of wind and solar in the nation, and it's Not close. Coming in at double the wind and solar production of second place, the liberal paradise we call California. Over the past couple of years, he has focused on ending DEI programs in Texas's institutions of higher education, collaborating with President Trump's policies to increase violent ICE raids on workplaces and communities across the state, and defunding public schools by promoting charter schools and cutting the school property tax, which, he says, is his #1 priority. If we want to see what impacts Greg Abbott's top priority would have in Texas, we can look no further than the abomination that is California's Proposition 13, a constitutional amendment which severely limits property tax growth. This proposition had the ruinous effect of completely gutting the California public school system, leaving California schools hopelessly underfunded, teachers underpaid, and students under-resourced. Another unfortunate side effect of Prop 13 is the complete and utter destruction of the California housing market, making it one of the most unaffordable places on the planet. Essentially, since developers and wealthy landowners didn't have to pay nearly as much taxes on their property, even as property values were going to the moon, they began to hoard housing across the state, treating it like a stock, like a speculative asset, a way to make a quick buck, instead of a place for ordinary people to live and start a family. And since higher taxes would only be charged on the property once it was sold, property owners had an incentive to just never sell. And what you get is a housing market where everyone is hoarding housing like it's goddamn toilet paper during the pandemic, and ordinary workers, through exorbitant rent prices, are pushed into poverty and homelessness. Today, Prop 13 is a sort of third rail in California. That is, if anyone tries to touch it or change it, they'll die. Straight up, their career is over. But if you want any single thing to blame for why California is the way that it is, Prop 13 is definitely a top-tier contender. But anyways, I digress. Today, Greg Abbott has just announced that he is running for a 4th term for governor, which, if he fulfills, he will have been the longest-serving governor in Texas history, with an almost 2-decade-long reign. Since Texas doesn't have any term limits, he could even run it back for a historic 5th term if he so chooses, and with fundraising as dominant as his and an immensely successful ground game, you can never count him out. After all, out of his 7 elections spanning almost 30 years, Greg Abbott has not lost a single one. But even so, in 2026, he still has to get past his current opponents. He has some fierce competition in Andrew White, the son of former Governor Mark White, and Gina Hinojosa, who, fun fact, is using the same strategy firm as Bernie Sanders in 2016, NYC Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani, and Maine Senate candidate Graham Plattner. He may also see competition from the Republican side, when Matthew McConaughey inevitably throws his hat into the ring within the next 5 years. But if Greg Abbott wins in 2026, which nobody expects otherwise, it will be a nice cap to the most dominant and historic career in the history of Texas politics. That is, until he announces his 2032 presidential campaign with a cool $290 million in the bank.